language that they didn't let sexual desires override their devotion to God. And they kept themselves pure until the marriage actually took place, the marriage feast. And so that's so unlike what we have today. And so one of our challenges is parents and grandparents talking to our grandchildren is to talk about the value of marriage and elevate it back to its proper place. Because over the last 10 years especially, we've seen the decline in the value that's placed on marriage. And probably the biggest hit that it's taken are due to two factors. First, the divorce rate, and I'll explain that. And second of all, the Supreme Court saying that you can't disallow any two people getting married, same-sex marriage. First of all, the divorce rate. Why was that going? How has that diminished marriage in people's eyes, especially young people? You hear this often. Why get married? Because it just fails anyway, and so many married people are miserable. Where do they see that, first of all? Their own parents, because they're raised in divorced families and with a stepfather or a single mother, and they've heard the fighting and arguing, and they look at that modeled for them, and they go, nope, I don't want that. And I've heard that many times, talking to young people, counseling them. And so the problem, though, is not with the institution of marriage. The problem is with what? The people that are trying to practice it, not according to God's standards, all right? And so Satan's really good at his craft, yes?
Even in the prison system, 75% of the prisoners have come from broken families.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's interesting. It doesn't surprise me, all right? So that's the first thing. And, of course, the second one is when you mainstream and legalize same-sex marriage, then marriage that was defined as between a man and woman by God for a lifetime, and now it's been reduced to it just destroys the sanctity of marriage in a lot of people's eyes. We have to raise it back up to where it was. And so when we look at Song of Solomon, here it's just, this is news articles just within this last month. More than half of Canadians in a new survey think marriage is unnecessary. Just trying to repeat or substantiate what I'm suggesting to you. 53% of participants said it's not necessary for couples to tie the knot if they want to spend the rest of their lives together. That's over the half, yes.
It's become more of marriages for the benefits. The romance of it is kind of lost today.
Yes, that's right. It's
Married so they get each other's insurance or benefits.
well, yeah. And then there's another thing that causes this decline. It's because, remember, God's plan is there was when you're espoused, the espousal period, that's when we would call it engaged, but you're bound to them. And then there's the marriage feast where that you come together. And then once you have this, then you enjoy sexual relationships, right? And so everything's looking forward, right? To the husband coming for you, the big bridal or a wedding ceremony, then the blessings of marriage. Now what happens so often? Sex, all right? And then what's there to look forward to? Well, why get married? Because we all have the blessings. We can just move in together. And then again, it all breaks up anyway. So it just all falls apart. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, again, when you remove God from society, it's a dominoes that start falling. And so here's something interesting on the other end of the spectrum. When you look at seniors, there's this phrase called a new term, couples living separate, CLS, or couples living apart together, all right? Living apart together. And what is that? A lot of older folks are getting together in committed relationships but not marrying. And sometimes they will spend, several days of the week together in the same house, but then they will have separate abodes for them, for the rest of the week. And you say, well, why aren't they getting married? There's similar reasons. Sometimes it's because financial. When they get married, they lose financial pensions and retirement plans. And I've heard that. I'm dealing with an issue that way right now. That if the two get married, one loses the benefits of her husband who died. And yet, sometimes they just don't want to. They just like the friendship. So it's with the young people, and it's also on the other end with the older people. And so we have some challenges before us. Now, here's a chart I just want to share with you about cohabiting. That's what the world calls it, cohabitation, or living together. What does the Bible call it? Immorality. It's just immorality. It's sexual immorality, all right? And so for the first time ever, the number of people that are between the ages of 18 and 30, there's more living together than there are married in the United States, all right? And you ask, why is that the case? First of all, it's interesting. The divorce rates by people that live together before marriage goes way up. This idea of trying before you buying, right? Try before you buy. You think, no, it actually backfires. The divorce rate is higher for those who live together before marriage. That's interesting. Well, why is this? I just want you to see this. The morality of self-fulfillment. This is a chart that shows when they survey people, how do you find happiness in life? Is it going to be God's standard, and that's what we're suggesting, or is there going to be another way to find true happiness? And I want you to notice, the best way to find yourself is by looking within yourself. That's 91% say that. The second one is people should not criticize someone else's life choices. Is that our non-judgmental, pluralistic, relative society in which we live? If you don't like it, that's your preference, but don't you criticize or say anything bad about anyone else. Because you need to look within yourself. Now, is that ripe with problems, looking within yourself? I mean, everyone's going to have a different thing that determines happiness, and it's subject to change just like the weather, isn't it? And so the second thing that's interesting, people can believe whatever they want as long as those beliefs don't affect society. Now, on the surface, you might say, yeah, what's wrong with that? You like Canadian bacon? I like pepperoni. That doesn't bother anyone, right? I like football, you like baseball. But wait a second, those are about preferences that have no morality attached to them. How are you able to decide whether my life choice affects society or not? How are you able to make that decision? Who's wise enough to understand? Was there a day, let's go out of the sexual realm and talk about smoking. Was there a time where smoking was accepted pretty much universally? And then they realized, it causes personal health problems, so they put the label on it. Then they understood it caused secondhand problems. They call it secondhand smoke, right? And now you cannot smoke in a restaurant because of secondhand issues, because your personal preference affects the neighbor sitting next to you. And so this right here, it does affect you. You can't do it. Now that's just with smoking, right? We're not talking about lying, smoking pot, or same-sex marriage, or euthanasia or abortion. Who has the wisdom to say, my life choice affects no one but me? Only God does, because he can only see the end result from the beginning. All right, yes, Clinton.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah?
Voted no. They just wanted to do as they please. Look what happened to them.
Well, exactly, all right? So you see what I'm saying? That's what we're doing here. I know we're off track here, but getting back to Solomon, this book is so important because it describes it, and it's shockingly to some erotic, and it is, because it's putting marriage in its proper place in God's eyes, unabashedly talking about what married life is supposed to be like. and unashamedly. And that's okay. We should be able to talk about it that way. Wayne.
Real briefly, you were saying, why does this happen?
Yes.
I've held theory for a long time that this has happened because of the technological advancements in communication. TV advertising, movies, mass media, all of those elements, I think you can lay their growth right on top of young people's attitudes about what is acceptable or not acceptable in society. And if everybody's doing it on TV or in the movies
Yeah.
or on mass media, it must be okay. If an alternative lifestyle is okay, well, society says it is, and look at all of the numbers
Yes.
that say it is. Mom and Dad, I know what you learn at church, but look at all of this out there.
Yes.
That's what you're up against, is society's media pressure.
No, and I appreciate that. So the question, I think, how do people come to this type of point of view? It's a full frontal attack, but media is the big thing. And when you see TV shows and they all always have a gay relationship, that mainstreams it, doesn't it? Was there a time Victoria's Secret commercials would have been only in a Playboy? Because it is Playboy's material. But now it's on TV, and who starts seeing it? All the way up. So that's mainstream. It's acceptable, right? And so now we don't want to be prudish about it because, again, we go back to this. It's okay in its proper relationship, but we have to be proper about it and the way we present it and talk about it. So I appreciate that comment because that's really what we're having here. So now let's look at this chapter 5, and there's 111 lines in this section, and 80 of them are from the woman. So that's significant because she is expressing her emotions and desires. The rest are of the man, the husband, speaking to the wife. And so we're going to see quickly, there's been problems here, and we're in this dream state again. Has he used this dream state before? All right. So it's not literal, but it's speaking of problems in the marriage. So chapter 5, verse 2. I was asleep, but my heart was awake. A voice, my beloved, was knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is drenched with dew. In other words, he's been traveling or working out all night, and it's morning, and the dew's in his head. He's made a lot of effort to come to her. All right? My head is drenched with dew, my locks with the damp of the night. So he's knocking and he's asking to come into her. And how does she come back in verse 3? I've taken off my dress. How can I put it on again? I've washed my feet. How can I dirty them again? What do we see a picture of her? Huh? Ready for bed or in bed, right? You know, why should I make all this effort for you? I'm tired. I just want to go to sleep. All right. Does that ever happen in marriage? Okay, just you've already betrayed yourself. It does, right? And that's okay because it's the natural ebb and flow of a relationship. Pretty soon, there's times we're just tired, and sometimes we become indifferent, and sometimes, well, the saying, familiarity breeds contempt. You know, it's just, you get tired of each other and their little idiosyncrasies, and I'm not saying it's healthy, but sometimes it's natural, right? And you have to work through them. That's what I want you to see when we talk about this. And so she's not willing to get up to receive him. Now, you're asking, receive them how? There's various views on this. First of all, it's just they're kind of gone their separate ways, and he's trying to engage with her on any level, and they're just kind of gone their separate paths. All right? Does that happen sometimes? Sometimes it's the husband. The woman wants to communicate and connect, and he's just, and just wants to watch his TV program. And here it's the husband trying to engage with the wife. The second thing that is suggested, he's trying to engage physically with her, and she really is not interested in it. All right? So biologically, one of the number one emotional need of a male is sexual fulfillment. It's the number one. Now I say emotional need. It's not just physical, it's an emotional need. It's a way they connect. Women connect often more by conversation, admiration, and affection. Now that can lead to the sexual fulfillment, but it has different roads to get there, all right? So sometimes since he's up here, looking for this and she's looking for that, they're like two ships passing in the night, right? They don't connect. Now, does that happen in a marriage? And so it's probably speaking perhaps of the latter, they're just not sexually getting together like they did when they were first married. And so that's what we see here. So verse 4, my beloved extended his hand through the opening, and my feelings were aroused for him. So I rose open to my beloved, my hands dripped with myrrh, and my fingers with liquid myrrh and handles of the bolt. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and gone. My heart went out to him as he spoke. I searched for him, and I did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer me. Now again, dream state, right? Not literal. So what's going on here? So we're seeing that here Clark says it was a custom among some ancient people to anoint doors by a bride with fragrant oils, all right? And so you could smell it on your hands when you open the door. There's a lot of other sexual explanations that is attached to this, but here's the picture. Finally, she says, okay, you're right? But when she goes to her husband, what? He's disengaged. He's not interested now. Doesn't mean necessarily he's physically left the room, but we're looking at a figurative picture. He's gone. He's left the house. Again, not literally, but can men check out and still be there physically, but not there, emotionally? Yes. All right. So that's what we see is happening here, because behold, he was gone. And so we're looking at these problems. I opened to my beloved, and maybe it was sexually too that it's being spoken about. She said, okay, but he's gone. So she goes through the city, and again, literally going through the city? No. Searching for him, and the guardsmen of the walls took away my shawl from me, and then we see that she didn't ask the daughters of Jerusalem. Remember they're singing in the background often throughout this play or this musical. If you find my beloved, as to what you will tell him, for I am lovesick. Now we see the problems progressed. First there was this indifference, maybe apathetic, or just this separation because the years have just taken its toll. It happens when you're raising kids. Often the mother, especially if she's at home raising multiple kids, does she have any energy left over for her husband when he comes home? Not much. It takes a lot of toll on them. And actually sometimes when the husband comes home, she says, good, you're home, they're yours, I'm going to the bedroom, right? Because wiped out. Is that a reality? Yes. And so I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it happens. But then when you wake up finally, and the years have passed, you realize we've grown distant from each other. And the emotional impact that hits you, and what does she say? I want to reconnect, he's not there, and I'm what? Lovesick. This is different than the lovesick that she said before when they were courting. This is lovesick looking back and wanting what they had when they were courting. See what I'm saying? Now, does that happen in marriages? Yes. So, if you find him, and so they asked the woman, the ladies of Jerusalem, the daughters, what kind of beloved is your beloved? Oh, most beautiful among women. What kind of beloved is your beloved that you adjure us? So now she's going to enter into this description. It's a quite lengthy one of how she sees her beloved husband. Women, memorize this, and then when you have a spare moment, sit your husband down and tell him these things word for word. And he'll go, huh, woman, have you lost your mind? Okay, why would I say that? Well, it's not the way we usually talk about each other today. Again, because culturally they're coming from a different place. Agricultural, very earthy. We kind of live in a society that's mobile with cars and technology. The way they would relate to each other is going to be different than us. But let's read it nonetheless, okay? So verse 10. Some of it we could relate to. My love, beloved, is dazzling and ruddy. Ruddy could mean manly. He's a man's man, you know. So outstanding among 10,000. Now, what husband would not want to hear that? You're dazzling, Jack. You're outstanding among 10,000 men. Oh, really? What about 20? That's what guys would do. His head is like gold, pure gold. His locks are like clusters of dates and black as a raven. What color is his hair? Yeah, has it grayed yet? No, we're still, young married. His eyes are like doves beside streams of water, bathed in milk and reposed in their setting. Bathed in milk, some suggested milk is white. So he has these dark eyes, but really white. The eyes are white, but the pupils are dark. I got it right, but real white. So they're just striking and probably very beautiful eyes, okay? Verse 13, his cheeks are like the bed of balsam, banks of sweet-scented herbs. His lips are lilies dripping with liquid myrrh. His hands are like rods of gold set with beryl. These are jewels. And his abdomen is carved ivory inlaid with sapphires. Does it sound like he's a fit person? They talk about six packs and all that. He probably had one, right? His legs are pillars of alabaster, just strong, set on pedestals of pure gold. His appearance is like the Lebanon, choice of the cedars. They were magnificent trees in their day, the cedars of Lebanon. His mouth is full of sweetness. He's wholly desirable. In other words, she loves kissing him. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Is that quite a description? So yeah, memorize it, change the words accordingly, and use that. And men need to do the same as well, all right? But that's how she describes him. A couple things. Make sure I got it all. Notice that he's wholly desirable, totally. This is my beloved. And she's looking back perhaps for the very beginning in the espousal period. He's still mine, and he's my friend. It's interesting, not just a lover, but a friend. And that friendship should grow as the years go on, all right? So now chapter 6, we're going to look at the reunion of their love. But we've talked about this before in our classes. We talk about it at length in marriage class, but I just want to share it again with you that there's 3 stages that marriages can find themselves in. And actually, this can be used of many relationships, okay? They just take a different, they have different, they just look different. First of all, there's a stage of intimacy, right? And that's where you see them in courtship, right? And when people are first in love, their first honeymoon, there's intimacy. You're wanting everything. You laugh at everything they say. All the jokes are perfect. You can't wait to see each other. And it's everything clicks, right? And that's what you want, intimacy. But every relationship moves from a stage of intimacy into a stage of conflict. Now, while we might not like conflict, some people tend to avoid it. and that means ignore it because you can't avoid conflict. It's inevitable. Will there be conflict in each and every relationship, especially the marriage one? I mean, there's conflict between friends. There's conflict in the church between members. There's conflict. It just comes with, unless you live on an island like Castaway, and that's not very nice either. Because what did Tom Hanks do when he's on the island? He made a ball his friend because, and he had conflict with the ball too, didn't he? That's what's crazy, all right? Conflict is inevitable, but sometimes we think, oh, conflict means like everything's falling apart, it's a failure, it's all going to blow up. No, we cycle from conflict back to intimacy, right? By resolving the conflict, apologizing, working out the details, correcting the misunderstandings, whatever it is. And that's why they say the best part of fighting is what? Making up, because you have intimacy again. And sometimes it's pure or higher than it was before the fight, right? And it's designed to be that way. Now, what's the third stage for people to remember this? The third stage of a relationship. All right, this one's the danger zone, and it's withdrawal. Withdrawal is when you go from an intimate, open arm relationship, like, yes, I'm all yours, no secrets, I feel totally comfortable with you. You can see my warts and my zits and everything, and I'm still feel accepted, right? No judgment. Conflict comes in that, but you're still open, right? Withdrawal is when you do this. You close your spirit. And why do you close it? You don't feel safe, and you're tired of being hurt, and the way you keep from being hurt is stop caring. You close yourself down, you stop caring, therefore you can't hurt me. So the things you used to argue about, you don't argue. He said, he won't talk to me anymore. Or the man, it's often the man, he says, man, I've tried to talk to her now, and I want to go to counselor. She didn't want to go. That's because she's been begging you for 5 years, and you wouldn't go, and now that the marriage is falling apart, you want to do something about it, and it's too late because she's like this, right? Withdrawal is a scary place because that's when divorce often takes place. Now, in our class, we're not going to go through this. You can get back to intimacy from here, but you got to go right through conflict to get there. You have to resolve all the things that caused the withdrawal. And that means you have to coach the person to open up, and that's very hard. They have to feel safe with someone. It takes mediation or someone else. So I say all that. Where is the woman and this man in our 3 stages right now as we ended chapter 5? Where are they? Conflict, maybe bordering on withdrawal. Are things really intimate on a day-to-day basis? No. And she is looking for him because she realizes something missing. He's not there. So maybe there's withdrawal on his part. Okay? And I just want to share with you, this is natural. It's normal. It happens with every relationship. To some people more than others. Every now and then I have someone say, yeah, me and my wife have never fought once in our marriage. And I roll my eyes in the back of my head so they can't see it. I go, yeah, right. But I've heard it enough from some people that I have to believe some people probably never fight. They're just on the bell curve. They're way over here. They're the 1% that just never have problems. Then other people on the other side of the curve, they fight every day, right? Like, why did you two get married, right? But most people are somewhere in the middle. They have problems. And as you work through them, you get closer together, and there's more intimacy and there's more friendship. So while none of this is discussed, we see in chapter 6, there is going to be a restoring of intimacy in their relationship. So let's read through it, and chapter 6 isn't very long, and then we'll make some comments. Okay. Where has your beloved gone? Verse 6. Chapter 6, verse 1. O most beautiful among women. This is the women talking. Where's your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you? So now she responds, my beloved has gone down to his garden. That's to work or his own place, to the beds of balsam, to pasture his flock in the gardens and gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine, he who pastures his flock among the lilies. You are as beautiful as Taraz, my darling, as lovely as Jerusalem, as awesome as an army with banners. Turn your eyes away from me, for they have confused me. Your hair is like a flock of goats that have descended from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes which come up from their washing, all of which bear twins, and not one of them has lost her young. Have we heard this language already? Chapter 4, who is speaking it? The man about the woman. So now we see in verse 4, he is speaking, and you hear his language. You're as beautiful as Taraz, my darling, lovely as Jerusalem. Has there been a reunion and restoration of intimacy at this time? Because she went searching for him, found him, and he responded in kind. Yes. So, men, memorize this. Speak to your wife this way. You're beautiful as Taraz. Now, that's a city. Actually, I'm not pronouncing it correct. Tirzah. It's a city in the tribe of Ephraim. It's supposed to have been very beautiful. Aren't there some cities in the States that they're just beautiful? And so it's just a figure of speech. But lovely as Jerusalem, of course, where the temple was. Awesome as an army with banners. Try that on your wife and see. She goes, oh, thank you. All right, but can you see an army coming, and what are they carrying in the front? All these banners and flags. They're very colorful and they're powerful and majestic because they're trying to impress upon people what a great army they are. He says, that's who you are to me. You're beautiful and just majestic. You're as lovely as Jerusalem. He says, turn your eyes away from me, for they confuse me. What is that speaking of? Huh? Overload. Thank you. Okay. Just like what he sees the desire in her eyes, and he just, it's overwhelming. And so he says, turn away and so your hair is like a flock of goats. We've already saw that coming down from the hill, dark hair. Remember the teeth that he mentioned, like a whitewashed lamb, so they're very white. He uses that same language there. And your temples were like pomegranate. In other words, probably the cheekbones, that she's got that rosy complexion. And so he's using the same language that was used there before. Then, this is interesting, and we'll have to stop a little bit and talk about it. There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and maidens without number. But my dove, my perfect one, is unique. She is her mother's only daughter. She is a pure child of the one who bore her. The maiden saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines also, and they praised her, saying. And we'll hear what it's saying in the next verse. So what does this sound like is going on? All right. So if this is Solomon, the one married to her, and she was the first one, what's happened in the years, he's married, 60 more and 80 concubines. And that's caused the conflict. She didn't want anything to do with him. And something happened that he woke up and came back to, you're still the best of all. And that would fit Solomon's life, wouldn't it? Many kings. Yeah, many kings. It could be her beloved, speaking of Solomon's many wives, hey, he's got some beauties down there at the palace. Is that possible? I mean, there are 60 queens, and we've got all these concubines, and we see them, and maidens all over, but compared to all of them, you're the most beautiful and the fairest of all. With that, speak well, earn some points, ka-chink, ka-chink, All right, but it has to come from the heart, all right? You take your pick. It's You read a lot from people that analyze all this, and it's not for sure. Well, here is the report that they make. Here's what they praise her saying. They're talking about her. Who is that grows like the dawn, as beautiful as the full moon, as pure as the sun, as awesome as an army with banners. I mean, that's quite a beautiful language. You're like the rising sun, the beautiful sunrise that are beautiful. You're like the full moon. Isn't that beautiful? You're like the sunset. And then he throws in the banners with the armies. Real male stuff, right? But, I mean, you're the supreme one. There's nothing prettier or better than you. I went down to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossom of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded or the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was aware, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people. We see that he's searching. So he says, come back, O Shulamite. This is the only time, I think, in the whole book is she's called the Shulamite woman. Come back and we may gaze at you. Why should you gaze at the Shulamite as the dance of two companies? So these are the women talking to her. So as we come to a close, here's another interesting I found just this last week. It's an article, happiness increases after 20 years of marriage. When couples manage to stay together, marital happiness is surprisingly stable over time, a new study has found. Now, this study did not say you're miserable for the first 20 years. It did not say that. It says what? After 20 years, happiness even starts to grow more. But it does acknowledge that there are troubles in the first 20 years, right? But if you have two people working on it under God's blessing, doing it God's way and committed to each other, working through the conflict back into intimacy, and sometimes getting help when you need it. If you manage, that's the word, the couples manage to stay together, because they're acknowledging a lot don't, right? When you manage to stay together after 20 years, it seems like this friendship becomes deeper than it ever was. And you hear people talking about it. I remember Lowell saying to us, and he says, yeah, you young people in love, you don't know what love is. I go, excuse me? I was first offended by it. But he said, no, you don't know what love is until you've been married 30 years. And you've gone through all these trials and troubles, and you have this friend, there's this real intimacy. And it's not just sexual based, it's so much deeper. It's truly one flesh. And I think that's what they're discovering. Oh, really? You understand God's way does work. And it took a study to tell people. No, it just takes us reading the Song of Solomon. And just listening to God and accepting that his wisdom is best. So the encouragement is what? Just hang in there. Work it out, okay? And so there's where we'll stop right here, unless you got a question or comment. I'm not going to say Sally. Linda.
I have trouble with the Song of Solomon because
Yes.
it's so physical.
Yes, it is. It's highly
I look
physical.
at Ecclesiastes 31. If my husband really wanted to praise me and make me feel good, he would say, an excellent wife, who can find it? She's far more precious than jewels. Her heart for her husband. Her husband trusts her.
Yes.
He will have no lack of gain. She's a partner. She's a helper. There's that inside
Yes.
spiritual part. This whole physical part, yeah, it's lovely in the beginning, but it doesn't last very long. This whole, your eyes are like doves or whatever.
No, I understand. And I think we have to marry the two together because one starts that way and it matures into the other as time goes by. And I think that's what that article's saying. This friendship grows and it transcends that. But there is still that deep affection for each other on every aspect,
I think we both need to understand. You just don't tell her how beautiful she is. You say, I trust you.
Yes.
You're my partner. And you're important to my life, and I appreciate
Yes.
what you bring to me
That's right.
spiritually. And the same for him, for me to say to my husband, you make my life better.
Yes.
You bring, I can't live without
Yes.
you bring emotionally and spiritually.
And I appreciate you saying that because we're in a highly figurative poem that's just highlighting it, and And it's not, he doesn't delve into these deeper things because these are really figurative for all of that. In the same breath, there is some value and importance, especially in young married life. The woman needs to know that she is the queen of that man's life. And likewise, he needs to know he's her king. And a lot of times that's physical. Early life. In other words, I adore you more than anyone. And not just physical, I'm just saying, but you're all I want to need. And so it transcends that, don't get me wrong, but it starts there often. And I think that's what it's addressing. All right? Yes.
Oh, I was just thinking that after 20 years of marriage, if kids are finally gone, hopefully you don't have to, I don't have that conflict of trying to raise them and are you doing it right? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So you could be a little closer, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Wayne.
Quick question, is Shulamite a nickname for the queen?
No, there is discussion where does that term come from. There's an area that they might think she's from, a Shulamite from that area. But they're not for certain. Okay, we're done. Thank you for your comments.